Check 1, 2. Do I sound excited or do I sound tired?
Maybe both. Maybe loopy is the right way to be.
Excitedly tired.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Hello and welcome to a late night election night 538 politics podcast. My name is Jody Avirgan, and I guess it's not election night anymore. It is Wednesday morning as we are taping this. Many of the results are in, at least enough to come to some general conclusions about the results from the night. So here to discuss it are senior politics writer Clare Malone. Hello, Claire.
Hey, Jody.
And managing editor Micah Cohen. Hello, Micah.
Hey, everybody.
And Nate is still trapped in the wilds of the ABC set somewhere. That hologram-filled extravaganza.
It's actually called augmented reality.
Oh, is
Jody?
that right?
Which is beautiful. They call it AR, augmented reality.
Really?
I've learned more about TV news in the past couple months.
Just by talking with those folks?
Yeah, just like talking to them, meeting with them.
Well, Nate is not with us because he is still stuck in the Matrix somewhere over on the ABC side. But look, let's talk about this a little bit. There are a number of things we don't know at the time of this taping, but let's talk about what we do know. The top line result is that it is a split result, mostly what we expected, with Democrats regaining control of the House and Republicans retaining control of the Senate, perhaps picking up a seat or two along the way. So let's just start with general reactions. Claire, what do you what's on your mind?
Well, in some ways, what we expected was going to happen happened, right? Which is that the Democrats took the House and the Republicans seem to be having a pretty good road in the Senate. So I would say from that, to use a tired 538 term, from that top line point of view, it's kind of what we expected it to be. I will say Florida to me as a state was a surprise. I really thought the Democrats had a better chance there. I think I was starting to think like, okay, I think the Democrats might win Florida, which, it is an interesting flip from 2016. But as we, walked in to tape this, the Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson in the Senate conceded to Rick Scott, the Republican. Andrew Gillum, the Democratic mayor of Tallahassee, who was running for governor, conceded to Ron DeSantis earlier tonight. So Florida, to me, as a state, was a surprise. Although, again, the top line in general of the night was not super surprising.
Yeah, my reaction is the same. Both the House and Senate results fell well within the meaty part of our forecast bell curves, almost dead center. Now, to be consistent, we shouldn't. That does not make our forecast more right than if they fell in another part of that 80% confidence interval. But it really in the House and Senate went as expected. Polls were generally good.
Right, but that's what it landing in the middle of that bell curve kind of hints at, is that the polls were generally pretty good.
Yeah, so right now I think it'll take days, maybe weeks for the national popular vote to get sorted out. People, they'll be counting votes in California for forever. But going into the night, we had the generic ballot at 8.7 percentage points. I think the last number I saw was a projection that had it at 9.1 points, less than half a point off. So really, things at the top line, as Claire says, went according to the script. We should talk more about Florida. I do think that's one of the biggest surprises.
Yeah. So, let's talk about Florida. So, I think that there was obviously a lot of interest in the races there, and we didn't use the word momentum on Monday's show, but I think that we sort of intimated that a lot of the last round indicators were breaking more favorably for Democrats. Does Florida show that maybe that wasn't the case, or was there something else going on there?
I think, well, one, the late movement towards Democrats was pretty marginal. I think, as we said, it was just a little bit. Look, I want to wait and for all the results to come in and look at this stuff. But I think that there's probably a story to tell about Democrats underperforming in the Southeast. They lost the governor's race and Senate race in Florida, as Claire said. They didn't lose by a ton, so it's not a crazy thing. But it looks like Abrams is going to lose in Georgia governor's race, And then, look, like Florida, one of our contributors, Nathaniel Rakich, did an analysis of every special election in the Trump era, and Democrats overperformed almost everywhere. Florida, though, was like the outlier, where Republicans had performed best there. Trump's approval rating has held up relatively well in Florida. So it's just like a lot of data suggesting that Florida's like on the red side of purple.
And we've talked about this on multiple podcasts, but just how the Florida and Georgia, the Democrats' proposition for winning was this turnout model for voters who needed to reach levels that were higher than 2016. And it's I think that's, for me, it was those were interesting races to watch. And so I'm sort of curious to see what Democrats take away from those two losses, whether it's, okay, those were uphill fights to begin with because they are, southern states with a certain kind of electorate, and we should still try this turnout model for 2020 and don't concede to the super centrist Democratic types of candidates. Yeah. Or if people will say, well, we need some super centrist Democratic kinds of candidates. I don't know. It's kind of, it goes back to that old post 2016 argument.
I think people, look, Gillum in Florida is going to end up losing by like a point.
Yeah.
I don't think in terms of interpreting what it means for the Democratic Party writ large or anything like that, I don't think you should get carried away there. Gillum losing by a point isn't that much different than Gillum winning by a point.
Yeah. I just wonder in the narratives, people overinterpret.
I totally agree with that. And like Georgia actually hasn't been called yet, but let's say Florida goes red in the governor's race. Let's say Georgia goes red. Walker is up by like 2 votes in the Wisconsin governor's race. Let's say he hangs on. I actually think those races, I mean, we talked about this before, but those will feel like they'll have a big sway in what the narrative is coming out of this, which right now, Claire and I were talking about this, it doesn't feel like there's a clean narrative.
Cohesive, this is the kind of election it was. It isn't the blue wave that everyone I
actually think it is. Sorry.
No. I mean, I will just agree that it does feel like one of these elections where anyone can come out of it writing their own narrative. So I don't know, pick that up. Come out of this and make the case for why you should call this a blue wave.
So here's why. The best kind of measure I think we have of the nation's mood politically is the National House popular vote, which again we think is going to be 8, 9, 10 percentage points, somewhere in there. That is the largest popular vote margin since 2008, which was a really good year for Democrats. It's larger than Republicans had in their wave year of 94. It's larger than Democrats had in their wave year of 2006. It's larger than the Republican wave years of 2010 and 2014. Now, a couple things. The House districts are drawn both because of gerrymandering and because of just sorting in a way that favors Republicans. So that general mood gets filtered into the House and gets skewed a little bit Republican. Democrats are still going to pick up 30 odd seats, right? Which that's a lot of seats. The Senate map is even more Republican. So that blue wave crashes into the Senate map and gets even more filtered out and skewed and blah, 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 blah. The governor's races, I think Democrats are still going to end up picking up a few governorships on net. But that's why I think those few high-profile races will end up having a lot of sways, because if they went Democrats' way, then the wave narrative is easier to say.
Yeah, but it seems a little bit like you're really backing into that wave narrative. You're making a lot of you're making a lot of stipulations and it almost feels like, in order for it to be counted, I think in people's perception of a wave, it almost sounds like you're giving people participation points and then calling it a wave. Because part of, I think in most people's minds, a wave would consist of a really good performance in the Senate as well as the House, as well as the governorships.
I totally agree with that. But I think that's not how people should think about it. I think people should think about what Americans want and then do the work of saying, Yeah, this was a blue wave, but because of structural factors, didn't manifest itself in this or that chamber.
Well, is there any chance that these structural things emerge because of what you just said as a potential narrative? I mean, is that going to ultimately be seen as the lesson of this election?
I think because of gains they made tonight or this year, I think Democrats will probably work to change some of those structural factors in terms of how districts are drawn. They obviously can't get rid of the Senate. But I don't know. It just like I think if they were smart, they would make those structural factors a thing to campaign on. Claire, you've written a little bit about this. Like, do you think Democrats will make the process of electing people a more central issue as opposed to this election was healthcare was their issue?
I think it's becoming more of a possibility for Democrats to make it an issue. I mean, when I first started working at a politics magazine, it was back in, I guess 2011, 2012. And back then, like, for wonky people, gerrymandering and voting rights was very much something you talked about. But voters, beyond people who were beyond communities who were being actively disenfranchised, it didn't really seem to resonate with voters. People didn't really, not that they didn't give a shit, but they didn't vote on it. They didn't vote on voting. And I do think that like the Democratic electorate is to a certain extent, I guess, like woker, more woke. And I think it's not just like, I'm not just talking about people seeing, structural racism, but it's about people saying like, oh, this is just, it's really just killing us in these elections. And, if we're going to use your argument, Micah, that tonight was actually a blue wave, which I think, people, that's, it's an interesting argument, but people are going to say, well, didn't manifest itself. It really stinks to lose all the time. And I think that it really stinks to lose all the time line will get Democrats more and more.
There, it's a blue wave, but there are dunes and a shore wall and
other reefs and other things.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And I mean, I guess to that point, they're flipping 5 governorships at least goes a long way towards being in a position to address some of those structural issues. A lot of those do happen at the state level. So we'll see if that's a long-term effect of tonight. I want to keep talking about some of the major themes that we've been covering throughout this election and see how they manifested themselves tonight. But first, I want to tell folks that tonight's podcast, this morning's podcast, whatever time it is brought to you by WeWork. When WeWork was founded in 2010, the primary focus was to provide freelancers and entrepreneurs with an environment that allowed them to engage with and benefit from a network of like-minded businesses, all in a setting that encouraged innovation and collaboration. Well, WeWork now provides a range of solutions for medium, large, and enterprise businesses as well, such as private office space for up to 200 people and full-floor custom build-outs. These include all the things you want in an office, like enhanced security, privacy, and the ability to express your brand identity while at the same time maintaining that innovative design, flexibility, and high-level of service that companies have come to expect from WeWork. From innovation labs to trading floors, regional headquarters to global campuses, WeWork is designing, building, and operating environments that empower your people to do their best work, which is really the goal of any business. When your people are at their best, so is your business. Visit WeWork.com to find a location near you today. WeWork.com. I entered some sort of tired fugue state while reading that. But let's come back and let's check in on some of these major themes that we were discussing throughout the election. Probably the one we talked about the most was gender, the gender gap, the role of women, particularly those college-educated women that we focused on a lot. Do we have a sense of whether they placed their mark on this election?
Yeah. So women, well, let's put it this way. Men were the only group that voted for Republicans demographically. Everyone else went for the Democrats. If you're looking at the nation overall, let me clarify. White men were the only demographic group that voted for Republicans. Everyone else went for Democrats, this is going by CNN preliminary exit polls.
Yeah, which can change a